But I mean,
definitely
this particular truth, though, I mean, like, again, we could spend hours talking about the various truths that are hidden from us. But it seems that this particular truth, Egypt, and what's under even that 85% of, Egypt that hasn't been excavated around the pyramids, it almost seems as though whatever answers exist about who we really are, where we really came from, what life is supposed to be all about, are literally there. And if those answers are to come out, this whole little mirage, this matrix we're living in, comes to an end almost immediately once we really know the truth of Egypt.
Well, and what's at the crux of that is free energy.
Mm-hmm.
Imagine no utility bills, no interest, no insurance, no taxes. Now, the ancient Egyptians paid taxes by paying their harvest, half their harvest, but that was later in the game. And what we examine with Egypt is the patriarchal, the dynasties, the aspect of Egypt. But pre-dynastic Egypt was matriarchal, honored the feminine, and we've got it all backwards. And so, but the most crucial part is a sustainable, non-polluting energy that's free. Now, Nikola Tesla was onto this, and if you look at the Tesla Tower that was built on Long Island in the early 1900s, the passageways underneath it, the limestone aquifer underneath it, are exactly replicas of what went on in Egypt.
I've seen the map. It looks exactly like the map of the inside of a pyramid and under a pyramid, what he was doing in Long Island.
Well, and it makes sense that someone would have carried that knowledge somehow. I mean, he was stumbling upon it, but I think he had the secrets of ancient Egypt. He's not the only one. Lead Scallion, who built the Coral Castle in Florida, also was able to move large stones with anti-gravity. We don't know what he was doing, but he moved them by himself, and he was a very slight man. And so free energy, even Nikola Tesla was ready to give that to the world. And J.P. Morgan and the bankers got in there and said, no way, we want to charge for that. And now, you know, we're really paying a lot of money for these things that should be free. But not only that, the way we do things now with energy pollutes, costs money, hurts the planet, damages things. But some people make a lot of money. I think that's the biggest kept secret.
And let's just explain quickly for the people out there, because for a lot of people, energy is only fossil fuels. When some people refer to energy without even a preliminary understanding of science and cosmology and physics, really, you just see as energy. You know, energy is the gas pump, energy is electricity. It comes from explosive energy, and that's really the only source. You touch on that great in the Pyramid Code. But what we don't seem to understand, at least a lot of us, is that energy exists everywhere, and tapping into it, at least in the ancient times, was not something that was seen as difficult. It was seen as absolutely natural, it seems.
Well, yes. And again, the powers that be want to hide this from us because it is natural and it is our birthright, and it's sustainable. The reason we don't understand it is we're not exposed to the information about it because it's hidden. Presently, there are 6,000 free energy patents that have been suppressed in the United States Patent Office.
Wow.
So we know how to run cars on water. There's all of this stuff is right at our fingertips now, but it's being blocked, and that's why we don't understand it. So in Egypt, it was a passive energy that worked with the beam of the sun on running water in a crystalline matrix in a zigzag pattern underneath the pyramid. And essentially what it was doing was blowing the oxygen and the hydrogen molecules apart. So they had microwave, they had nanotechnology, they had all kinds of things that the evidence is there for it. But we're blind because we've been taught to look somewhere else and to think that we're completely dependent on fossil fuels. And all of that is really misinformation that's, you know, propaganda, you know, that's repeated and repeated and repeated, that basically has us empty our pockets in order to support it. And it really has to stop, I think.
Well, it seems like we're in those times where the rubber hits the road, the fork in the road, and we are going to ultimately decide collectively which way we go. One of the things that I've heard you say in interviews before, which really helped crystallize things for me in terms of the perspective people, again, naturally take towards looking back in time, which is these people were primitive / less knowledgeable than us who are more evolved. So, okay, now let's examine these pyramids. We can't figure out, did they have a crane? Well, they didn't have, they must have had slaves. And if you just flip that on its ear and understand, which you're excellent at articulating, is that these ancient civilizations were not primitive, but were in fact more advanced than us, then you can start to see this a little clearer with more of an open mind.
Well, I call it the myth of progress, and you have to remember that we've got propaganda everywhere. And the pattern is they repeat and repeat and repeat, and then we believe it. So even if we're coming into a mini ice age, as long as they tell us it's global warming, then we're okay, then it's global warming.
Sure.
But yeah, the pattern is there. We're told we're the smartest we've ever been, and we are in a bloodbath of blood from death.
Yeah.
We're completely barbaric. Greed, power over, we're not concerned about our fellow humans. All of this is not advanced. And so as long as we think the ancients were primitive, then we get to, think we're so high and mighty. And it just doesn't add up. And it's disturbing that it doesn't add up. And why not respect the ancients?
Yeah, and it's such a crucial point, though, too, because it clouds your ability to look at this through the right prism. And again, I understand, we believe in linear time. We don't necessarily understand the cycles. So, of course, it would be logical to people that we are at our absolute apex as a species. But in fact, there's plenty of evidence in Egypt and elsewhere in the world that would suggest that we've been through this. We've seen this movie before, and we've actually been at in a golden age, so to speak. And this is what you really believe a lot of the early ancient times in Egypt was around, and potentially that's something we're moving towards today.
Sure, and another way of putting it is calling it the Darwinian delusion. Even Darwin wasn't sure about his own theory, and his book was republished, and he wanted to put a new preface in it, but it somehow fit with the cultural ideals that were being promoted at the time. And psychology was coming out, and Freud was talking, about penis envy, and there was all these different things that were promoting the masculine and promoting this whole way of being and thinking that didn't add up. Now, even Champollion, who was the one who deciphered the Rosetta Stone, was concerned that his theory was incomplete, but it was pushed forward because it supported the agenda of the 5,000-year cycle that we're coming to the end of. And this is going to, I think, this is going to come to be seen as the patriarchal hiccup, because all of the rest of time had more sanity, more humanitarian ways of being and thinking. And then this time, I think it's a failed experiment.
Yeah.
Lop off the feminine, pit everybody against each other, compete, greed, and this is the end result. Look at the mess we're in. But the other thing is that the patriarchy's agenda has been to erase everything other than itself. And they've taught us through the Bible and all of that to look at the last 6,000 years only.
Yes.
And so we don't have, how do you expand your brain to go back 10,000, 20, 50, 100,000 years? Yet, anthropological studies find 250,000-year-old skeletons and older than that. But the thing is that what patriarchy's done, divide and conquer, divide all the departments. So anthropology can't speak to linguistics, can't speak to archaeology and physics and archaeoastronomy. So nobody's talking to each other to bring these puzzle pieces back together. And if it doesn't fit within the model, it gets thrown out. That's how science is done now. And you know that many professors, the closer that they're hooked into the academic world, the more they're afraid to speak outside what's acceptable. But what if we have it all wrong? What if everything that we're repeating doesn't add up to anything at all?
Well, I mean, it seems to this point in history we've only ever been wrong. Yet at every juncture, we still are not able to say, wait a sec, guys, remember the last time we were all absolutely sure this wasn't true, and then it got revised, that guy's dead now, or we killed him? Maybe this time we're going to be a little more open-minded. We talked about that with Dr. Amit Goswami, who's really done a great job around the physics of consciousness, and he talks a lot about how, it's been, again, a very conscious decision to keep everything separate. In an illusion of separateness, you don't have chemistry speak to biology or biology talk to physics, when in fact, obviously, how could you give a holistic interpretation of anything when everything's compartmentalized? We're going to talk about that a little more after the break. Also get into the deeper history of where we think Egyptian culture and our culture originated from. More with Dr. Carmen Boulter after the break on the One Network.
The Egyptians provided us with concrete evidence that describes political events from a far more distant past than we can imagine. Why has this been overlooked?
The Egyptians themselves, in at least one stone tablet, the Palermo stone, and one papyrus, the Turin papyrus, they say that ancient Egypt is much, much older than the Egyptologists think it is. So to dismiss that is, of course, an assumption that contemporary Egyptologists know a lot more about ancient Egyptian history than ancient Egyptians do, which is a form of typical arrogance on the part of the academic community.
It could take tens of thousands of years for the Nile to have migrated 8 miles. Can we use this evidence to redate these monuments?
When you look at geology, you can see that the riverbed has migrated all the way from the west, beyond 50 kilometers to the west. Then it passed across the plateau, and you can see that the ancient riverbed actually went right up to the pyramids, and the initiates could have stepped right off these barges up onto the causeways into the pyramids. Now, if you look, the Nile is a full 8 miles to the east, and it's the dividing point between Cairo and Giza. And so if we look at geological time, it would take several tens of thousands of years in order for the Nile to make that migration.
And welcome back to the One Network. Our guest today, Dr. Carmen Boulter. And before the break, Dr. Boulter, we were talking about the compartmentalization of the various disciplines in academics or science that, it seems to be, something that just organically happened. And if you look at it closer, it actually looks a little more sort of deliberate and or diabolical. But it is interesting how it does not allow for fully comprehensive contextual explanations of almost anything, because you don't have all of the information, whatever compartment you're in. You're somebody that's been inside this world before and for a long time. And now it seems we're understanding, well, if things are interconnected and interdependent and therefore holistic, we need to know a little bit about anthropology, chemistry, biology to be able to properly assess things. How do you see the history of the academic culture affecting our understanding of who we are?